Every time automotive engineers create something revolutionary, somewhere in a government office, a man with a clipboard starts sweating. We're told car regulations exist purely to keep people safe, but automotive history tells a far more interesting story. Again and again, engineers built machines so advanced, so fast, and so far ahead of their time that governments, racing authorities, and safety boards didn't know how to control them. Some inventions were labeled dangerous, others were buried under impossible regulations, and a few were simply too powerful to be allowed to survive. For decades, a hidden war has raged between fearless designers chasing speed, performance, and innovation, and bureaucrats armed with rulebooks and red pens. The moment engineers discovered how to make cars corner harder than physics should allow, cut through the air like fighter jets, or turn night into daylight, the crackdown began. These weren't engineering failures. They were breakthroughs so effective that regulators panicked. Today, we're opening the vault of forbidden automotive technology to uncover 15 genius car features that governments and rulemakers moved quickly to kill, ban, or regulate out of existence. And the war truly began when engineers discovered the terrifying power of airflow. What started as a harmless search for speed soon became a full-scale legal battlefield once designers realized aerodynamics could transform ordinary machines into ground-hugging missiles capable of unimaginable performance or catastrophic destruction. This brings us to feature number 1, sharp hood ornaments and spinner hubcaps. In the mid-20th century, stylists treated car design like a branch of the military aerospace industry, bolting on razor-sharp fins, massive chrome spears, and spinning hubcap blades that looked like medieval weapons. While these features looked incredible sitting under dealership lights, pedestrian safety councils quickly realized that a minor accident at 20 miles per hour with a 1950s Cadillac or Plymouth was essentially an encounter with a medieval lance. Governments stepped in and legally flattened these ornaments into boring, flush-mounted plastic badges, bringing a swift end to the era of rolling chrome weaponry. But as the styling restrictions tightened on the streets, engineers on the racetrack took aerodynamics to a terrifying extreme, leading directly to feature number 2, high-mounted active wings. In the late 1960s, innovators like Jim Hall with his Chaparral 2E race car began mounting massive driver-adjustable wings directly to the suspension components on towering struts. Because these wings could change their angle on the fly, drivers could flatten them out on the straights for maximum speed and flip them down in corners for unimaginable grip. The technology was flawless, right up until the moment those spindly struts snapped under the immense pressure. After a series of catastrophic high-flying crashes where cars literally took flight into the grandstands, international racing bodies and highway safety boards moved overnight to ban any aerodynamic device that moved while the car was in motion. The death of active aerodynamics forced engineers to get creative on production road cars, which brings us to feature number 3, the iconic pop-up headlights. For decades, legendary sports cars like the Ferrari F40, the Chevrolet Corvette, and the Lamborghini Countach used hidden headlights to keep the noses of their vehicles incredibly low, sleek, and wedge-shaped, allowing them to slice through the air with minimal drag. However, by the late 90s, global transport bureaus took a closer look at what happens when a wedge-shaped car hits a pedestrian. While a normal bumper might cause a pedestrian to roll over the hood, an extended, rigid pop-up headlight mechanism acted like a brutal, sharp-edged shin breaker, causing severe injuries even at low speeds. Between the strict new European pedestrian impact laws and the mechanical complexity of the motors, governments effectively regulated the pop-up headlight out of existence, forcing designers to return to fixed, bulky glass housings and closing the curtain on the sleekest era of automotive styling. When engineers tried to revolutionize how cars illuminate the dark, they didn't just fight the night, they fought decades of frozen, unyielding government legislation. This brings us to feature number 4, Citroën swiveling headlights. In 1967, the brilliant French designers behind the Citroën Ds introduced a system where the inner headlights were mechanically linked to the steering wheel, physically turning into corners before the car did to light up blind bends. It was a massive safety triumph everywhere in the world, except in the United States. The American Department of Transportation had a rigid, outdated law on the books from 1940 stating that all vehicles must have fixed, non-moving headlights. Because the government refused to update its paperwork for a foreign innovation, this life-saving steering technology was outlawed in the U.S. market for years, forcing Citroën to lock the headlights in a straight-ahead position for American buyers. As lighting technology advanced, the legal battles only grew more absurd, leading to feature number 5, high-intensity laser high beams. In the mid-2010s, luxury brands like Audi and BMW perfected laser lighting systems capable of throwing a crystal-clear beam of light nearly half a mile down a dark highway, double the distance of standard LEDs, while using cameras to automatically shade out oncoming drivers so they wouldn't be blinded. It was the ultimate midnight driving tool. Yet again, United States safety bureaus banned the feature instantly. Why? Because a 1968 safety standard legally mandated that car headlights must have separate, distinct high and low beam settings, making modern, continuously adapting digital laser matrices technically illegal. It took nearly a decade of corporate lobbying before governments finally began relaxing these ancient rules. But governments didn't just target the front of the car, they went after the rear too, which brings us to feature number 6, sequential dynamic turn signals. When Ford introduced the 1965 Thunderbird, it featured a mesmerizing rear light bar where 3 separate bulbs lit up in a clicking inward to outward sequence to show exactly which way the car was turning. It was intuitive, highly visible, and instantly loved by the public. However, traffic safety boards in several states and international districts immediately banned the setup. Bureaucrats argued that moving lights were distracting to trailing drivers and violated the strict legal definition of a flashing light. Ford was forced to modify the wiring in multiple regions until strict standardized surface area laws were met, showing that even the simplest, most logical lighting upgrades could be snuffed out by a government red pen. Moving from the outside of the car to the inside, engineers soon realized that the dashboard was the next frontier for cutting-edge technology and the next prime target for government crackdowns. This brings us to feature number 7, 1980s cart touchscreens. Long before Tesla put massive iPads into car cockpits, Buick shocked the automotive world in 1986 by installing the Graphic Control Center inside the Riviera and Riata. This was a literal, green-glowing cathode ray tube television screen built right into the dashboard, allowing drivers to control the climate, radio, and even check vehicle diagnostics with the touch of a finger. It felt like stepping into the cockpit of a spaceship. However, transport bureaus and safety advocates instantly panicked. They argued that a glowing television screen forcing drivers to look away from the road to adjust the fan speed was a recipe for catastrophic distracted driving. Under immense regulatory pressure and threats of impending bans, General Motors quietly pulled the plug on the project by 1990, locking touchscreen technology in a legal vault for nearly 2 decades. When designers weren't being restricted by what was on the dashboard, they were being restricted by where the driver actually sat, leading directly to feature number 8, central steering wheel positions. When the legendary McLaren F1 hypercar debuted in the 1990s, it featured a genius 3-seat layout with the driver positioned dead center, flanked by 2 passengers slightly behind. This gave the driver perfect visibility and a pure race car-like command over the vehicle. But when McLaren tried to sell the car globally, government-type approval boards threw up a massive wall of red tape. Bureaucrats pointed out that central seating violated strict safety laws regarding standardized airbag deployment zones, crash test barrier alignments, and even basic societal rules like reaching out the window to pay a toll or grab a ticket at a parking garage. The regulatory headache was so severe that almost no mainstream manufacturer has dared to build a mass-production 3-seater since. But the final straw for interior regulations came when engineers tried to eliminate the physical ignition key entirely, resulting in feature number 9, early unencrypted Bluetooth and wireless ignitions. In the early 2000s, luxury manufacturers rushed to introduce the first proximity keyless entry and push-button start systems, allowing drivers to keep their keys in their pockets. It was the ultimate convenience. What the engineers failed to anticipate, however, was how easily these unencrypted radio waves could be intercepted. Car thieves quickly developed cheap amplifier boxes that could catch the signal from a key fob sitting inside a house and beam it directly to the car parked in the driveway, unlocking and starting it in seconds. Recognizing a massive wave of high-tech vehicle theft, European and North American governments stepped in with strict new anti-theft mandates, forcing automakers to immediately overhaul their frequencies and ban these early, vulnerable wireless setups in favor of heavily encrypted rolling code systems. With the interiors locked down, engineers took the fight back under the skin of the vehicle, using radical mechanical engineering to bend the laws of physics until the rulebooks bent them back. This brings us to feature number 10, the Brabham BT46B fan car tech. In 1978, Formula One genius Gordon Murray realized that instead of relying purely on wings to push a car into the asphalt, he could just suck it down physically. He mounted a massive engine-driven fan to the back of the Brabham race car, sealed the underbody with flexible skirts, and literally vacuumed the car to the track. The grip was so immense that driver Niki Lauda won its debut race with effortless ease. The reaction from the governing bodies was instant fury. Rival teams complained that the fan was dangerously throwing rocks and track debris directly into the faces of trailing drivers. Deemed an illegal, movable aerodynamic device that made cornering speeds lethally high, the FIA banned the fan car after just one single race, locking away the ultimate traction cheat code. As engineers looked for other ways to cheat physics on the tarmac, they turned their attention to how a car steers, leading directly to feature number 11, mechanical four-wheel steering, 4WS. In the late 1980s and early 90s, Japanese manufacturers like Honda with the Prelude and Nissan with the 300ZX perfected systems where the rear wheels would subtly turn in tandem with the front wheels. At high speeds, they turned the same way for razor-sharp lane changes. At low speeds, they turned the opposite way to make parking a breeze. It was a mechanical masterpiece. However, when these cars hit European markets, certain strict transport districts panicked. Bureaucrats and vehicle inspectors, completely unfamiliar with the technology, argued that a car with rear wheels that moved independently looked like it had broken suspension or was actively sliding out of control. Fearing it would confuse other motorists and fail standard vehicle inspection layouts, regulatory hurdles and threats of bans heavily suppressed the technology until modern electronics brought it back decades later. But the most ambitious attempt to completely rewrite automotive engineering came when manufacturers tried to replace the piston engine altogether, resulting in feature number 12, Chrysler's turbine-powered engines. In 1963, Chrysler built 55 prototype cars powered not by traditional internal combustion, but by a literal jet engine that could run on anything, from diesel and gasoline to vegetable oil and even tequila. The engines had a fifth of the moving parts of a standard V8, required no antifreeze, and ran incredibly smooth. It felt like the absolute future of transportation. But just as Chrysler was preparing for mass production, the United States government passed the Clean Air Act of 1970. The turbine engines, while extremely clean in terms of carbon monoxide, naturally produced high levels of nitrogen oxide due to their intense operating temperatures. Combined with strict new government fuel economy mandates that the thirsty turbines couldn't meet in stop-and-go traffic, the government effectively legislated the jet car out of existence, forcing Chrysler to infamously crush almost the entire fleet. While individual mechanical upgrades were being snuffed out one by one, the ultimate showdown between genius engineering and government intervention happened when a single team decided to combine every forbidden technology into one unstoppable vehicle. This brings us to features number 13, 14, and 15, the Williams FW15C Active Electronic Suite. In 1993, the Williams Formula One team built what is still widely considered the most technologically advanced racing car to ever touch tarmac. Engineers didn't just push the boundaries, they completely rewrote them by packing the car with 3 revolutionary electronic systems working in perfect harmony. First was feature 13, fully active hydraulic suspension, which used an onboard computer to calculate the track surface every millisecond, keeping the car perfectly level and at the absolute ideal ride height through every single corner. Next was feature 14, automated traction control, which monitored wheel spin instantly and adjusted engine power so perfectly that drivers could bury the throttle without ever losing grip. Finally, they integrated feature 15, a electronic continuously variable transmission during testing, which kept the engine pinned exactly at its peak horsepower RPM at all times, making the car sound like a screaming jet fighter. The result of this tech suite was total, undisputed devastation. The Williams car was so overwhelmingly superior that it didn't just win races, it made the rest of the grid look like they were standing still. Drivers barely had to manage the limits of grip or vehicle balance anymore. The computers did it all perfectly. This triggered an immediate existential crisis for the sport's governing body. The FIA realized that if this level of automation continued, human driving skill would become completely irrelevant, and the multi-billion-dollar sport would turn into a battle of computer programmers. To save the entertainment value and force the sport back into human hands, the FIA stepped in at the end of the 1993 season and passed a sweeping emergency regulation that outlawed the entire active electronics suite instantly. The Williams FW15C was forced into a museum, cementing its place in history as the car that was simply too genius to be allowed to exist.